your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
It's been decades since the legendary martial artist Bruce Lee passed away, but his legacy remains intact to this day. The world reveres him as an icon. He had skill, charisma, and discipline, everything necessary to create an everlasting impact. But we're not here just to talk about the man he was. Instead, we're taking a look at the lessons he left for us to learn from and morph into our own lives. The biggest one, arguably, was to become like water. There's only one thing. What does it mean to become like water? And how would one achieve that state? Maybe a better way to explain the phenomenon would be with a bit of backstory. At the age of 17, Bruce Lee was sent to train under the legendary Ip Man. And while he eventually became one of his favorite pupils, there was a time when Bruce Lee and Ip Man were at odds. One of the many reasons for that was that the young martial artist refused to adapt. He wanted to use Wing Chun for offense and offense alone. That wasn't something Ip Man was willing to just stand by and watch. Being the master that he was, Ip Man told Bruce Lee that the only way for him to become a better fighter was through the art of detachment. Think about it for a second. Our attachment to certain thoughts, things, and even emotions limits us from reaching our true potential, and that's what Bruce Lee set out to do. There was a problem though. It was easier said than done. So the story goes on to say that the martial artist took a sabbatical for a while, recused himself from all commitments, and set about to reach this art of detachment. Remember, Bruce Lee was the greatest of the greats. He could reach physical and psychological states we couldn't imagine. Yet, for some reason, he couldn't master the art of detachment. This angered him, ironically, and he decided he needed to take a breather and start over. He spent a week meditating and decided to take a sail to clear his head. It was during this journey that he realized something. He needed to be like water. You'd think that we just did a complete 360 and we're back where we started, but no. Here's the thing. Bruce Lee was so frustrated with himself that in that anger and emotion, he punched the water. What do you think happened next? The water didn't punch back. The water had no problem bending its path. It didn't mind taking on a different shape when he cupped his hands together, and that should the water turn into a wave, it'd be enough to drown the martial artist's sailboat. The water was shapeless. Well, in a sense at least. You could fill something as small as a cup and as large as a pool with water, and the result would be the same. Water would take on the shape of wherever it is. If you confine yourself to a form, one that you believe is at your strongest, you'll eventually find yourself anxious in unfamiliar surroundings. Being like water is more than just about being adaptable. It's also about flexibility and your ability to detach yourself from this belief that you've achieved an ultimate state. In Robert Greene's best-selling publication, The 48 Laws of Power, he reflects on Bruce Lee's teachings. On Law 48, Greene explains what it means to become like water. He claimed that to be like water is to allow yourself the space and time to adapt. For that, you must first empty the metaphorical cup. Think about it this way. Currently, you're holding onto a form, and let's say that form is a cup. The cup isn't half empty or half full. It's most useful to everyone when it's empty. Arguably, that's the only time someone can make use of it. Bruce Lee believed that to be shapeless was to first empty the cup and allow yourself the space to reflect, adapt, and then navigate through an ever-changing environment. In some cases, it would be in a fight. It would be in your professional life. And maybe sometimes your personal life too. Besides a principle to live by, Bruce Lee wanted people to adapt and be flexible when practicing his own stylized mixed martial arts form, Jeet Kune Do. This hybrid form of martial arts was inspired by Zen Buddhist and Taoist philosophies, along with some of Bruce Lee's own. At the heart of it, Jeet Kune Do demanded that fighters adapt themselves to any situation that comes up in a fight. Naturally, to adapt, you'd have to conform to the ever-changing environment during self-defense, and be flexible enough to switch up where necessary. Jeet Kune Do was also highly influenced by the lessons Bruce Lee had learned from Ip Man, a martial artist of arguably the highest order. After learning Tai Chi-style boxing from his father, a young Bruce Lee developed a keen interest in Wing Chun, an ancient Chinese form of martial arts that was taught exclusively by Ip Man. There was a problem though. Ip Man initially turned Bruce Lee away when he approached his school in 1953. The fictionalized version of this story, the one we've all come to accept, is that Ip Man refused because Bruce Lee wanted to use Wing Chun to prepare for gang fights. That's only partly true, because after learning Tai Chi-style boxing, Bruce Lee was involved in Hong Kong's gang scene and had several conflicts. Still, that wasn't why Ip Man refused to teach him. No, the real reason was that Bruce Lee wasn't 100% Chinese. Wing Chun is a sacred Chinese martial art form, and Ip Man, as well as other teachers, believed that it should only be taught to other Chinese people and them alone. Bruce Lee was a quarter European from his mother's side, and this hindered his enrollment at Ip Man's school. Nevertheless, determined as ever, Bruce Lee managed to convince Ip Man that he was worthy and even became one of his favorite students. According to some, Ip Man would only personally train a handful of students, and they were the ones he believed would achieve a great deal in the world of martial arts. In hindsight, he was right. Circling back, the idea of becoming like water and adapting to even some of the toughest situations stems from lessons Bruce Lee learned in his own life, dating back to 1953. He taught this philosophy to his students, who flocked to his studio wanting to learn Jeet Kune Do. But this wasn't just something Bruce Lee wanted them to incorporate into fights. No, becoming like water was a philosophy on how to live your life. How many times have you come across a situation where you found yourself stuck, anxious, and defeated? Complex situations are a part of life. You can't avoid them. What separates people, however, is their ability to navigate through those situations. You could either do two things when faced with adversity: retreat into your shell and stay there for all of eternity, or, and you probably guessed it already, you could become like water. Another thing to remember here is that water holds immense strength. When flowing at rapid speeds, water can cut through stone. When flowing peacefully, it'll just adapt its path along the stone. Water doesn't resist, it persists. And that's exactly what Bruce Lee wanted everyone to take away from his philosophy. Water has duality. It's humble, yet powerful, peaceful, yet frightening, and serene, yet impactful. Becoming like water is a timeless piece of wisdom one of the world's leading mixed martial artists and entertainers developed at the ripe, young age of 17. People barely remember Bruce Lee as a philosopher, but that was also one of the many hats he wore. He learned from his own experiences and morphed them into his teachings. His legacy isn't just the many movies he starred in, but the words of wisdom he left behind. Arguably, his teachings are more important in the 21st century than ever before. Look around you for a moment. Is anything still? No. Everyone and everything is moving at a fast-paced speed. You're probably inclined to put on your running shoes just like everyone else and compete in this race too. The only question is, where's the finish line? We talked about how water is flexible and how that aspect could help in self-defense. We talked about water's adaptability and how that would be useful when navigating through complex situations. And now we're talking about how water reminds us to stay calm, collected, and take time to reflect. The story of Bruce Lee punching the water in frustration when he couldn't master the art of detachment goes a little further too. While he was pondering on what it means to adapt yourself as water does, he noticed the reflection of the birds on the water's surface. This helped him further his philosophy of becoming like water. He understood that to become like water, you have to let some things pass. You can't be like stone. admittedly rigid but stuck in its ways. A stone wouldn't reflect on its surroundings. Instead, it would stay there, dormant as ever, and refuse to change. Why? Because it found a form it's most comfortable in, a form that might have helped it over the years to face certain challenges. One day, though, this rigid stone would come across a challenge its form can't handle. What would happen then? Again, to be human is to deal with adversity in one way or another. And while water would be able to reflect on its surroundings and allow itself time to take on the shape of the vessel it's in, the stone wouldn't. It can't.